From a very early age, many people are quietly trained to believe that their worth depends on the reactions of others. A child learns quickly that praise feels good, approval brings comfort, and acceptance creates a sense of safety. Over time, this natural desire for connection slowly evolves into something deeper and more dangerous, the belief that value must be confirmed by the outside world. Without realizing it, people begin measuring their lives through applause, recognition, and approval. This is where the illusion begins. External validation feels powerful because it seems to confirm identity. When someone compliments your work, agrees with your opinion, or admires your achievements, the mind interprets it as proof of importance. For a brief moment, self-doubt disappears. Confidence rises. But the problem with this type of confidence is that it is borrowed, not created. It exists only as long as the approval continues. The moment that approval disappears, uncertainty returns. People who depend on external validation often live in a constant emotional negotiation with the world around them. They adjust their behavior, opinions, and even personality to fit what they believe others expect. Instead of asking what feels true to them, they quietly ask a different question. Will this make people like me more? This question slowly shapes decisions, careers, relationships, and even identity itself. Social environments reinforce this illusion in subtle ways. Schools reward certain behaviors with praise, workplaces reward performance with recognition, and social circles reward conformity with acceptance. While these systems can encourage productivity or cooperation, they also plant the idea that approval is the ultimate measure of worth. Many people grow up believing they must earn their value continuously through achievements, popularity, or a constant agreement with others. Modern life has intensified this illusion even further. With social media and digital platforms, approval is now quantified and displayed publicly. Likes, comments, shares, and followers create a visible scoreboard of validation. People begin to associate these numbers with their personal significance, as if attention from strangers confirms the value of their existence. The mind starts chasing these small bursts of recognition like rewards, reinforcing the belief that being seen and approved by others is the same as being meaningful. But beneath the surface, something important is happening. The more someone relies on external validation, the more fragile their sense of self becomes. When identity is built on other people's reactions, it becomes unstable because those reactions constantly change. Praise today can become criticism tomorrow. Popularity can disappear overnight. Opinions shift, trends evolve, and the same crowd that celebrates someone one day may ignore them the next. This creates a subtle form of psychological dependency. Instead of developing an internal foundation, a person begins living like a mirror, reflecting whatever expectations surround them. They become careful with their words, cautious with their creativity, and hesitant with their individuality. Authentic thoughts are filtered before they are expressed. Genuine impulses are restrained if they might disrupt approval. Life becomes less about self-discovery and more about social survival. The irony is that most people who are chasing validation believe others are paying far more attention than they actually are. In reality, the majority of people are absorbed in their own concerns, insecurities, and struggles. While someone might briefly judge or praise another person, their attention quickly returns to their own lives. The imagined audience that seems so powerful often exists mostly in the mind. Yet the illusion persists because the emotional reward of approval is immediate and comforting. Each compliment, each acknowledgement, each moment of recognition temporarily quiets inner doubt. The mind begins associating validation with security, reinforcing the cycle of seeking it again and again. Over time, the pursuit of approval can slowly disconnect a person from their own inner compass. Decisions become guided by reactions rather than convictions. Actions are shaped by expectations rather than authenticity. A person may achieve success, admiration, or popularity, yet still feel strangely uncertain about who they truly are, because their identity has been constructed through reflections rather than through self-understanding. There comes a moment in life when the illusions that once guided behavior fall away and a startling truth emerges. No one is coming to rescue you. No one owes you understanding, attention, or approval. No one is obligated to fix your problems or guide your destiny. At first, this realization can feel isolating, even cruel. But for those willing to sit with it, it becomes the doorway to something profoundly liberating, the awakening of radical responsibility. Radical responsibility is the understanding that your life is yours, and yours alone. It is the recognition that every choice, every action, every outcome is, in some measure, the result of your decisions. This is not about blame or guilt, it is about power. The power to shape your life does not lie in the hands of others, institutions, or circumstances. It lies entirely within you. Before this awakening, many people unconsciously hand over responsibility for their lives to external forces. They blame situations, relationships, or society for their unhappiness. They wait for guidance, approval, or permission to live authentically. This is natural because dependency provides comfort. It allows the mind to avoid the weight of accountability. But the illusion of security is fragile. When the realization finally strikes that the external world does not guarantee safety, clarity emerges. This clarity often arrives suddenly, sometimes triggered by failure, loss, or betrayal. A project collapses, a relationship ends, or unexpected support disappears. And in that moment, there is a choice in despair or empowerment. The person who embraces radical responsibility recognizes that while they cannot control every event, they can control their response. They can choose how to act, how to interpret their experiences, and how to grow from adversity. The awakening of radical responsibility shifts the entire perspective on life. It moves focus from what others should do for you to what you can do for yourself. No longer is life a series of expectations to be met or judgments to be avoided. Instead, life becomes a canvas, and every decision becomes an opportunity for creation. This shift is deeply empowering because it restores the authority over one's own existence. With responsibility comes freedom. Paradoxically, the moment a person accepts full responsibility for their life, they stop being a victim of circumstance. Failures are no longer devastating, they are informative. Mistakes are no longer shameful, they are teachers. Challenges are no longer obstacles to complain about, they are invitations to grow. Every difficulty becomes a chance to exercise agency. Radical responsibility also cultivates self-trust. When external validation loses its hold, the inner voice becomes the primary guide. Decisions are made from reflection and discernment, not from the fleeting opinions of others. This strengthens confidence, clarity, and resilience. Over time, a person who practices radical responsibility develops a profound sense of autonomy. that cannot be shaken by the whims of society or the judgment of peers. Importantly, radical responsibility is not isolation. It does not mean abandoning connection, empathy, or collaboration. Rather, it transforms relationships. When a person takes full responsibility for their emotions, actions, and growth, they stop expecting others to manage their happiness or provide validation. This creates healthier interactions because relationships become partnerships of choice rather than crutches of necessity. The awakening of radical responsibility also changes how one views success and failure. Achievements are not measures of approval from others, but reflections of effort, courage, and integrity. Failures are not humiliations to be hidden, but experiences to be analyzed, understood, and learned from. Life becomes a continuous process of experimentation and refinement, guided by personal accountability rather than external dictates. Every step taken with radical responsibility builds momentum. Challenges that once seemed insurmountable now become milestones. Fear of judgment diminishes because the opinions of others are no longer the measure of worth. The mind grows sharper, the heart steadier, and the will stronger. And in this transformation, a person begins to realize that true freedom is not found in permission from the world, but in the unshakable commitment to own every aspect of one's existence. From the earliest stages of life, humans are conditioned to worry about how they appear in the eyes of others. Childhood experiences, cultural expectations, and social norms all reinforce the idea that approval is paramount and criticism is dangerous, even subtle cues. A disapproving glance, a raised eyebrow, or a withheld compliment can imprint deep-seated fears that echo into adulthood. The mind internalizes these signals, creating an invisible chain, the fear of judgment. For many, this fear governs choices, shapes behavior, and quietly limits potential. The fear of judgment is both subtle and powerful. It often masquerades as caution, politeness, or social intelligence, making it difficult to recognize. A person may believe they are simply being considerate, careful, or realistic, but in truth, the underlying motivation is anxiety, the need to avoid disapproval. This fear dictates how people speak, what they express, which paths they pursue, and which dreams they suppress. It silently narrows life, creating self-imposed boundaries that feel necessary for safety, but are in reality unnecessary. Escaping this fear begins with awareness. The first step is noticing how much energy is spent anticipating the reactions of others. How often does someone pause before speaking, worrying about whether their words will offend or amuse? How frequently do people avoid taking risks, fearing ridicule or failure? How many creative endeavors are abandoned before they even begin because the imagined judgment of peers looms too large? Recognition of this pattern is crucial because until one sees the grip of fear, it continues to operate unconsciously. The next step is understanding the nature of judgment itself. Most people overestimate how much attention others give to their actions. Social psychology shows that while individuals may notice a mistake or a misstep, these moments are often fleeting. People are preoccupied with their own lives, their own insecurities, and their own judgments. The imagined audience that seems omnipresent is, in truth, mostly imagined. Yet the mind amplifies this audience, creating a shadow that feels overwhelmingly real. Freedom from judgment arises when this realization is internalized. When it is understood that the vast majority of opinions are transient and self-focused, the emotional power of criticism diminishes. One begins to see that the need to be constantly approved of is a self-imposed limitation rather than a reflection of reality. This shift is liberating because it reorients the source of confidence. Approval no longer comes from others, it comes from within. This freedom transforms behavior in profound ways. People begin speaking their minds without hesitation, expressing creativity without restraint, and pursuing goals without the constant question, what will they think? Decisions are guided by values and desires rather than imagined expectations. Risk-taking becomes less frightening because failure no longer carries the weight of social condemnation. The mind, once restricted by fear, begins to explore new possibilities and new dimensions of self-expression. Additionally, freedom from judgment fosters authenticity in relationships. When the need for external approval is released, interactions are no longer transactional or performative. Communication becomes honest. Connections become deeper. Friendships are chosen for alignment, not validation. In professional or creative contexts, people take ownership of their work without obsessing over how it will be received, focusing instead on integrity, quality, and personal growth. The emotional benefits are equally transformative. Anxiety diminishes, self-esteem strengthens, and mental energy previously devoted to monitoring others' reactions is redirected toward creation and action. Confidence is built not on fleeting praise, but on a consistent internal compass. Mistakes no longer produce paralyzing fear, they become opportunities to learn, adapt, and improve. Ultimately, freedom from the fear of judgment is the gateway to a life of courage and authenticity. It allows a person to operate from curiosity rather than constraint, from exploration rather than inhibition. With each step away from the imagined gaze of others, the self expands, revealing a capacity for growth, creativity, and fulfillment that was always present but previously obscured. It is the realization that living fully does not require permission, approval, or acceptance, and in this realization, the mind begins to experience a liberation that is both subtle and profound. For much of life, people search for guidance externally. Advice from friends, mentors, teachers, or leaders is sought as if it were a compass pointing the way. Cultural norms, societal expectations, and conventional wisdom are followed as rules to live by. While guidance can be valuable, over-reliance on it can quietly erode personal power. True authority, the ability to navigate life with confidence and clarity, comes not from others but from within. The power of inner authority is the recognition that your own judgment, discernment, and intuition are the most reliable tools you will ever possess. Inner authority begins with self-knowledge. It requires an honest and uncompromising look at one's values, desires, strengths, and weaknesses. Without this awareness, the mind is easily swayed by outside influences. People who lack inner authority often feel conflicted, hesitant, and indecisive, constantly looking outward for confirmation. They ask, is this right? Or, will this be accepted? Instead of listening to their own voice, the awakening of inner authority shifts the question to, does this align with who I am? Developing inner authority also demands courage. It is not simply a matter of ignoring external advice. It is the ability to weigh it critically and decide whether it serves your purpose or undermines it. This often requires going against the current of popular opinion or challenging deeply ingrained social expectations. Acting from inner authority may sometimes provoke criticism, misunderstanding, or isolation, but those who cultivate it understand that these external reactions do not diminish the validity of their choices. Intuition plays a central role in inner authority. It is the quiet sense of knowing that arises when the mind is still and unencumbered by fear of judgment. Intuition is not impulsive or reckless. It is informed by experience, reflection, and deep self-awareness. Listening to it allows a person to make decisions that are authentic and aligned with long-term goals rather than immediate approval or short-term convenience. Over time, this trust in one's own judgment strengthens, creating a foundation of confidence that external validation cannot shake. Inner authority transforms relationships as well. When a person operates from self-guided principles rather than reactive tendencies, interactions become more authentic and balanced. Boundaries are maintained not out of fear or defensiveness, but as an expression of self-respect. People become less reactive to manipulation, less dependent on approval, and more capable of contributing meaningfully without compromising their values. The ability to navigate social dynamics from a place of internal certainty creates clarity and respect that others instinctively recognize. This internal power also fuels resilience. Life is unpredictable, full of challenges and setbacks. Those with strong inner authority experience difficulty not as paralysis, but as a test of discernment and adaptability. Decisions are made with awareness, not panic. Failures are evaluated objectively, and lessons are extracted rather than regret accumulating. The mind learns to trust itself in uncertainty, knowing that no external guidance is perfect or permanent, and that personal judgment, honed through reflection and experience, is a constant and reliable resource. Creativity and innovation thrive under inner authority, when one is no longer constrained by the imagined or real expectations of others. The mind explores ideas freely. Risk-taking becomes informed rather than fearful. Projects that may have been abandoned due to self-doubt or the fear of criticism are pursued boldly. The courage to trust one's vision rather than defer to prevailing norms often leads to breakthroughs in personal and professional life alike. The cultivation of inner authority is a gradual process. It requires consistent attention to self-awareness, reflection, and action aligned with personal values. Each decision made from this internal compass reinforces its strength. Each moment of resistance to external pressure builds confidence. Over time, the sense of self becomes anchored in internal understanding rather than external reaction. Those who fully embrace their inner authority discover a form of freedom that is rarely experienced. Decisions are clear, actions deliberate, and life becomes a conscious expression of personal choice rather than a reactive dance to external influences. Challenges are met with grounded confidence, and success is measured not by the approval of others, but by the alignment of actions with one's own principles. The power of inner authority transforms uncertainty into clarity, fear into confidence, and limitation into possibility. Self-reliance is often misunderstood as mere independence or isolation, but its essence is far deeper. It is the capacity to trust oneself, to draw strength from within, and to navigate life without depending on the constant affirmation or intervention of others. Transformation through self-reliance begins when a person realizes that true growth, freedom, and fulfillment cannot be delegated. No one else can live your life for you, make your decisions, or carry your responsibilities. The moment this truth is fully acknowledged, a profound shift begins. A shift that rewires the mind, strengthens the spirit, and redefines the way one engages with the world. Many people spend years unconsciously outsourcing their sense of security to external sources, relationships, jobs, or institutions. They look to others to solve problems, confirm choices, or provide emotional stability. While support can be helpful, over-reliance on it creates vulnerability. When these external supports fail, the consequences can be disorienting. Loss, betrayal, or disappointment can feel catastrophic, not because the events themselves are unbearable, but because they reveal the fragility of depending on others for one's stability. Self-reliance begins when a person decides to internalize that power instead of seeking it externally. At the heart of self-reliance is responsibility. Each choice, each action, each consequence is accepted as belonging first and foremost to oneself. This is not a punitive idea, rather it is empowering. Responsibility for one's life creates freedom because it acknowledges that the ultimate control resides within. External circumstances may influence outcomes, but they do not determine the inner capacity to respond. A self-reliant person recognizes that life may not always be fair or predictable, but that adaptability, resilience, and resourcefulness are cultivated from within. Transformation through self-reliance also requires courage. It is easier to follow the guidance of others, to conform, or to defer to established paths. But true self-reliance demands that a person trust their own judgment, even when it contradicts conventional wisdom or challenges societal expectations. This kind of courage often manifests in small decisions, first expressing honest opinions, pursuing unconventional goals, or setting personal boundaries. Over time, these small acts compound, strengthening confidence and reinforcing the sense of personal agency. Equally important is the cultivation of self-awareness. Self-reliance cannot flourish without understanding one's values, strengths, weaknesses, and desires. Reflection, mindfulness, and honest assessment of one's own motives create the foundation for autonomous action. A person who knows themselves deeply is less likely to be swayed by fleeting opinions, social pressures, or fear of criticism. Their decisions are guided by clarity rather than confusion, by insight rather than impulse. The emotional effects of self-reliance are profound. Anxiety stemming from uncertainty about approval, support, or acceptance diminishes. Dependence on others for emotional validation decreases, replaced by an internal sense of stability. Challenges and setbacks are no longer paralyzing because the mind has cultivated the capacity to respond rather than react. Confidence grows from the consistent practice of managing one's own life, and a deep-seated sense of freedom emerges from knowing that fulfillment is not contingent upon the actions or opinions of anyone else. Self-reliance also reshapes relationships. When a person no longer seeks validation or rescue from others, interactions become more authentic. Connections are built on mutual respect rather than necessity, and engagement is based on choice rather than dependency. Others are appreciated for what they offer, not relied upon for what must come from within. This creates healthier, more balanced, and more meaningful relationships. Transformation through self-reliance extends to action and creativity. The self-reliant individual pursues goals with clarity and initiative, unencumbered by fear of judgment or external control. They take risks that previously felt impossible, experiment without hesitation, and persist despite obstacles. Independence does not mean rejecting support entirely. It means being anchored in oneself first and seeking external resources as complements rather than crutches. Ultimately, self-reliance fosters a continuous process of growth. Each decision, challenge, and achievement reinforces inner strength. Each moment of uncertainty becomes an opportunity to exercise judgment and adaptability. Over time, life itself becomes a teacher, and the mind grows resilient, disciplined, and creative. The person who masters self-reliance discovers that the power to transform their life was always inside, waiting for the courage to claim it, and that the journey itself becomes a path of profound personal freedom, empowerment, and authentic expression